Thanks for checking out this year's Symphogear review, which I really wasn't planning on releasing around Christmas time again. It just kind of worked out that way. Regardless, I'll try and see if I can get to AXZ before December 2020. Well, I managed to do it a little earlier. Counts for something, right? But yeah, honestly, I've been meaning to get back into this series. With XD having very unfortunately shut down its global version back in July, I do kind of fear this series being lost to the sands of time. I mean, just the sheer amount of energy it generates from its over-the-top action starring a bunch of magical girls fueled by the power of song is infectious. Thankfully, an actual Blu-ray of the first season has been recently released by Eastern Star, so it still has at least some presence here in the States. With those formalities out of the way, let's get into today's subject, the sort of middle child sandwiched between what some consider the worst and best seasons of this series. Now, I made no secret, while I didn't outright dislike GX, I also did think it had some disagreeable elements to say the least. But give the creators credit, they listened, and this season ended up addressing a lot of those issues. Probably helped by the fact that this was the first season where director Katsumi Ono was able to give it his undivided attention after Arc 5 didn't quite work out. Yeah, maybe next time cut back on the synchro dimension there, dude. Still, the question is, how much did it benefit from this? Well, let's take a look at Symphogear AXZ to find out. We opened this season surprisingly not on a big stupid action scene. Well, it's your own fault for trying to take a monopoly on the magical girl genre. But yeah, okay, maybe this will be a more laid-back series where we explore the characters' personalities and relationships, and nah, of course not. Also, I gotta give props to the fan subbers for translating Kika and later Shabi's quirky little verbal tics with this. But yeah, with the blessings of her personal waifu, Hibiki and company were off to a war-torn country where we got our first sign that this might be a much better season than the last. As while the militias were your standard evil war tyrant fare, they had some interesting weapons, namely the alkanoids. Right off the bat, I love this idea of connecting things back to the last season, showing that there were indeed lasting effects to it. Of course there would be others who could replicate the foot soldiers of the last season, especially after the OGs were seemingly destroyed. It really does show how much this world is expanding after 3 seasons that, for the most part, were relatively self-contained. We'll also get some more connections to the characters' past in just a bit, but first, naturally, an over-the-top action scene with even Ogawa joining in on the action. I think he was there because, let's face it, the human enemies were way off their league. Oh, how I miss this absolutely stupid yet awesome action. Of course, they tried throwing everything at them, including the kitchen sink. Well, at least they're self-aware. Maria's team, unfortunately, were unable to join in on the fun due to a lack of linker, but they still had their absolutely preposterous moments.
Excuse me, what?
Honestly, I don't know what's more insane, this or this dude not being turned into Destroy Man.
But that was awesome.
And after that little fever dream, we're quickly brought down to normality as Chris clearly had some very traumatic connections to this place. Yep, this was the war-torn country that her parents thought would be a great idea to take their daughter to for a little family vacation. Seriously, what's wrong with going to Universal Studios? I hear Harry Potter's pretty great over there. But yeah, once again, this country was experiencing massive guerrilla warfare thanks to the alkanoids being provided by... I mean, to be fair, this series was always hinting that they would go in this direction, but just keep reminding yourself, this is an anime about a bunch of singing magical girls fighting the Illuminati. But yeah, and arguably the best bit of continuity in the show, they confirmed the Bavarian Illuminati had connections to all of their previous antagonists, giving us an actual payoff to a lot of foreshadowing that we got started from G. This actually feels like a very Katsumi Ono decision, with the show gradually building towards these bigger and shadowy organizations, like going from satellite security to 5D's own version of the Illuminati. The dude might have had a bit of an obsession with them, but regardless, it's still good stuff that makes for a very naturally flowing narrative in a series that you wouldn't expect to have all that refined of a narrative. The Gear users' next mission took them to a chemical plant controlled by the militia. Of course, they took on some of the alkas, including the banana types. Anyone up for smoothies? And hey, who says you can't have too many explosions in one episode? This is what happens when magical girl anime are deprived of action because the pre-Cure season of that year was Kira Kira. Meanwhile, the leader of the militia was visited by their benefactors, the Illuminati, led by Saint Germain, voiced by another member of both Sphere and After School Tea Time. They also had the Chocobo from Shield Hero and... Oh god, Shota Aoi. Okay, nothing against someone who, as far as I know, identifies as male playing a female character, especially someone with as androgynous a voice as his, and there is a legit storyline reason why Cagliostro is voiced by a guy, but oh jeez, I can't stop thinking about those Pop Team Epic cameos. If anyone knows what the hell those were about, please feel free to tell me. Anyway, they also used the power of song, some awesome orchestral tunes at that, along with some alchemy which, if you know your FMAs, requires a little equivalent exchange.
Done.
So yeah, after seeing that dude's pleasurable face, why don't we up the phallic imagery with a giant snake monster that they unleashed to chase down some SOG agents after Fujitaka forgot to put his laptop on mute. Seriously, what the hell, dude? And again, this show is kind of giving me some 5D's vibes, though not quite as blatant at least. Fortunately for them, Maria was there to put Saint Germain in her place. Using the last of their linker, the B team had to make this one count, and they were doing an admirable job, but until the villains pulled out some blatant cheat codes like reversing time. However, they did have at least one significant weakness. Quick little reminder, the one saying this is this meme lord. Anyway, that plus a convenient train let them escape. Germain could have given chase, but they had a different mission to fulfill. During all of this, the original trio did want to help, but they were busy rescuing some hostages from the remaining militia. They were led there by a kid named Stefan, who also happened to be the younger brother of that lady from Chris's flashback, Sonia. He helped them rescue the hostages, but such bravery came at a cost. And to avoid full carbonation, Chris made a difficult call. Yeah, better his leg than his whole body, lady. Yeah, okay, I'll say right now, I don't completely dislike this subplot, as it will give us some great Chris moments that I'll point out, but this does feel a little forced. Back with the Illuminati, we learn more about their backstory and their history with Fine and... Okay, when is this variant of Francis Drake coming out in FGO? Anyway, they came into conflict with Fine due to their competing goals, resulting in the loss of this autoscorer named Tiki. With her back in their possession, they could continue their operations. Though before that, Cagliostro and Prolati tried to deal with the gear users. Maria's team tried to deal with them, but were also starting to run on fumes with the effects of their linker starting to run out. To make matters worse, some civilians were in the middle of the crossfire. I think I just found my new favorite character in this show. Kika and Shabe tried to help the plane while Maria dealt with the enemy. During all of this, Elf9, who regretted the fact that she was unable to replicate Dr. Ver's linker recipe, was astonished by their determination and even took notice of Maria releasing some kind of aura. Of course, we got an awesome action scene out of this, with the only thing missing being the pilot's reaction to all of this insanity. The linker finally ran out, and Cagliostro still had their big snake to finish them off with, but then you know who came in. Y'all clearly haven't been introduced to Hibiki Tachibana. That led into the end of episode 2, and thus the third episode opened with the girls already back in school. Oh come on, you're not just gonna leave us hanging like that, are ya? Well, okay, they actually did show us the resolution to that scene, though through a bit of a clumsy flashback. Saint Germain came in to order a retreat and also reveal their plans because Symphogear villains and all that. In fact, they did have similar goals as Fine with all of their human liberation talk and all that, though obviously with different methods. Key among them was the aforementioned Tiki, who they reactivated through the power of, astrology? You know, I'm already starting to like this version of the Star Fairy more than the one we got in Precure. Seriously, I do actually like this ditzy character and her dedication to their boss named, Adam. Because, get it? It's the name of the first man and all that. I mean, seriously, who would name their kid that? After a cool, though slightly needless action scene, we got a big exposition dump where Genjo revealed a little bit more about the origins of some of the Symphogears, which tied back to World War II, and the Germans, which I won't go more into detail about, not on YouTube at least. After that briefing, Hibiki met with Miku and, hey, nice wallpaper there, girl. Yeah, Hibiki, never forget the fact you're dating a yandere, so just take the necessary precautions. Anyway, they ended up talking about Chris's situation, who just so happened to be in the next booth over, and she told him not to worry about her. Chris, please stop! I legit can't handle you being the best girl all the time! And after a little discussion about birthdays and summer homework, the original trio went straight back to work against some nearby Alkas. Obviously, they were really over-leveled against them, so the Illuminati threw in a new challenger. Ooh, you know the situation's serious when Gendro says Dato. Seriously, how did that become such a meme? But yeah, this new enemy came with its own reality marble that managed to buff its allies' defenses. Thus, in order to compensate, it was time for the return of the Ignite modules. This also gave Elf 9 an opportunity for a character moment where she managed to figure out the new enemy's ability. From there, it just took a rather clever echolocation tactic to expose Daddy Longlegs. Again, as brainless as this series can get, I do like how they're showing actual progression with good character moments and them changing up their tactics like this. And of course, some awesome Kamen Rider / Gundam finishers don't hurt either. Episode 4 opened with a flashback for Saint Germain, where we learned that she was the daughter of a slave who had relationships with her master. And judging by his words and how he treated his own daughter, there was likely not a lot of choice involved. Can no one in the show just have a happy backstory? Obviously, her mother passed away, but Saint Germain managed to live on many years later thanks to alchemy, and was now a part of Adam's crusade for the greater good. She was in the middle of creating some Faust roles for her team, leaving the rest of the Illuminati waiting on their completion. However, Cagliostro then decided to take things into her own hands. I ain't say anything. Meanwhile, Song was evacuating a rural town in Matsushiro in order to secure an old research facility. This did end up bringing up some ethical issues with Tsubasa about forcing the civilians to just leave their homes, which thankfully didn't take up too much of this episode's runtime, and it wasn't too heavy-handed. Honestly, I'm not sure if this series could handle that kind of subject matter, and besides, the focus needed to be more on Maria's team. With still no linker, they were given the non-combatant task of checking for any remaining civilians in the area. Without her gear, I would imagine Kika is the first one to die in a horror movie scenario. They did find one civilian and an old lady who was still picking her tomatoes. Unfortunately, they also found one Cagliostro with no castle. The original trio went to help their friends, with Chris being the first on the scene with a new transformation that unfortunately didn't include a bang. Regardless, she managed to rescue her friends, and it didn't take long before the others arrived. And it was at that moment Cagliostro knew she had fucked up. Understandably, she was forced to retreat and would probably not be able to eat solid food for the next few months. back with Maria and the old farmer lady, she tried one of her tomatoes.
甘い。フルーツみたい。
Oh yeah, worth mentioning, Japanese normally consider tomatoes to be vegetables, not fruits. This is the same country that considers this to be blue, so go figure. My OC aside, the old lady did provide a good speech that, just like tomatoes, great things are achieved through at least a little bit of hardship. This ended up reminding Maria of her time training to become the next Fine, which would become a lot more relevant later. In the meantime, the original trio had to fend up some Alkas with their Ignite modules, but just as it seemed they had won, the Illuminati arrived with their new Faust robes, which, yeah, compared to Carol's from last season, just don't look that good in my opinion. Prelati has an oversized hood and yet wears a skin-tight bodysuit that absolutely clashes with it. Saint Germain unfortunately looks the worst of the three, with hers being a mess of colors. I get they're trying to go with a knight look to match up with her sort of crusade goals, but good god, that plume is way too huge, along with her hair that seems to puff up more than her entire torso. Cagliostro, by default, looks the best, as at least her bikini armor design isn't too busy and at least somewhat matches with her regular attire. Thankfully, XD gave them some new Type 2 designs that look so much better, Prelati especially being a marked improvement. Sure, Saint Germain still looks a little busy, but at least she got rid of the Super Saiyan 3 hair. Questionable designs aside, we once again got an Alkanoid situation, as their robes had holy properties that could purify and cancel out the Ignite module's more demonic properties. The situation only got more dire once the big bad made his very flashy entrance. Seriously, dude, don't steal Gilgamesh's gimmick. I'm pretty sure he's still pissed at y'all for what you did to the Gay of Babylon. Yeah, anyway, the agent of Nudist Beach unleashed a nuke created through alchemy, but fortunately the B team acted like good tomatoes and saved their friends in spite of the strain on their bodies. This continued into the next episode, with Maria's team requiring some time to recover, though not as much as Elf 9 expected based on the fact that they had no linker. Scab and Kika actually managed to recover relatively quickly and even began training again. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to talk about your transformation next season. Regardless, they were still in no condition for actual battle. During all this though, Elf 9 had theorized a way that she could streamline the linker making process by deciphering some of Dr. Ver's theories.
本当に素晴らしい生化学者だったと言えます。素晴らしい。ゾッとしない話ね。
Oh come on, the dude had his moments every so often. One thing she had noticed was the fact that Maria's gear had the ability to work around the lack of linker, hence the blue aura. Thus, Elf 9 believed that by pinpointing what mental faculties were triggering that, she might be able to apply it to her linker formula. While the show can be very, very over the top, it at least sticks to its established lore and rules. Maybe a little bit too much, as we'll soon see, but still, it's worth praise here. During all of this, the antagonist, or more specifically, Tiki, was excited to see her master again, and tried to share her excitement with everyone. Well, you almost had him there, Tiki. Maybe next time try Kiamekin, and definitely don't start up a cult chant if at all possible. There was also a little bit at the Kazunaris, but that'll be more relevant later, so let's just get back to Maria's stuff. To really get into her head, Elf 9 repurposed some of Dr. Ver's tech into a familiar-looking VI visor. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be the first time a character voiced by Yoko Hikasa would enter into a virtual reality. Though this stuff was more Inception than GGO, as Elf 9 traveled through Maria's memories of the past. Eventually, they reached her subconscious, where for some reason, all of the scenery seemed to be chewed. Not all that surprising. I mean, that amount of ham isn't going to leave your system that fast. During all of this, the other gear users were enjoying their school festival that, for whatever reason, also had some plot convenience news playing at the time. As it turned out, Stefan was doing much better, even managing to acquire a prosthetic leg. Hibiki thought this would reassure Chris, but...
悩んで下した決断がいつも正しいわけじゃない。それどころか、初めから正解がないなんてこともザラにある。
Yeah, I got nothing. That was just a really good quote that I wanted to play. And in fact, I think I'm just gonna save this for later. The Illuminati launched another attack, this time with giant Hydra Alka, leading into the next episode. Our heroines tried attacking the creature, but again, Hydra. Granted, it didn't follow the exact same concept, but it was still quite the challenge that would require some help from Maria's team. The lady herself still had to decipher her inner verb, which was already a not impossible challenge, but also hearing some voices from her past put her back into her old emo phase. All seemed lost until she found the light at the end of the tunnel that was Nastasia's tough love. Yeah, well, I'll say right now, I don't completely agree with this message about accepting a parent's tough love as a means of making a child stronger. I do understand what they're trying to say here, and will at least accept it as a part of this show's narrative. With that, Elf9 managed to find the missing ingredient to her linker recipe and... Wait, did I just say the L word twice in the last few sentences?
Don't say it!
Back from whence you came, you cursed meme! But yeah, by literally putting some love into her linker, or more specifically, focusing on the chemicals in the mind that produce that emotion, Elf9 managed to make enough of the drug to get Maria's team back onto the battlefield. You know, when you say stuff like that, I can't even really get upset at how cheesy all of this is. With that, the Gear users managed to even up the odds and even push back and destroy their helicarrier. Can't wait to see the look on Samuel L. Jackson's face. Saint Germain tried to get a cheap shot in, but Hibiki stopped it and thankfully called out the hypocrisy of this group. Sure enough, they were trying to use similar methods as Fine from the first season, leading into the last episode we'll cover for today. Though while their methods were similar, the Illuminati's goals were more about ironing out all of humanity's imperfections rather than ruling over them, so yeah, basically a human instrumentality project and all that. More than a little cliched and eye-rolling when it comes to anime at this point, but as we'll see, this group does at least bring some interesting wrinkles into this conflict. And at the very least for now, they do have some good interactions with our protagonists. I wish more anime protagonists would say this to all of these freaking Knight Templars. Needless to say, at this point in the series, Hibiki could pretty much win all moral debates with these antagonists and even managed to prove that she was the better person when she rescued her enemy from a wayward attack. This even seemed to force Saint Germain to retreat and rethink things. Further drawing back from previous seasons, Song realized the Illuminati were going to use the ley lines from the last season to accomplish their goals. Thus, even though they did kind of win this battle, things were about to get a lot more difficult, especially since their Ignite modules were rendered useless. Hibiki tried to get some advice from her personal waifu. What was with that grunt? That sounded more annoyed than confused. Who knows, maybe she's just not the biggest fan of FMA or something. Still, legitimately sweet moment between the two, where we actually got to see how Miku originally became so infatuated with Hibiki through her truly selfless nature. Kinda reminds me how I should probably still be concerned about what might happen to Nodoka by the end of her season. On that note, Elf9 made a breakthrough that could upgrade all of their Symphogears using something from Hibiki. That's something surprisingly coming from a throwaway scene from G after Hibiki began fusing with Kanede's gear. So yeah, the day is going to be saved by... how did Hibiki put it? Well, if it's a creation of the platelets, then it must be something good. Jokes aside, I just love how much freaking continuity is in this whole damn season, where even something that probably was originally an inconsequential scene managed to become a major plot point here. Anyway, using this full stone, as Chris called it, they would be able to counter the Philosopher's Stone-fueled Faust robes. Only problem was, said stone was at the underwater research facility from last season, which, yeah. Maybe, but it wouldn't have been nearly as awesome. The Illuminati launched another attack, unaware of what they were doing and only really aiming to extinguish their enemy. They were of course doing this more for Saint Germain's sake and less for the exhibitionist and his naked ass. But yeah, they were determined to make sure her goals were achieved, though those intentions proved to be their downfall, as by focusing on their leader's goals, the two were unable to properly coordinate, unlike Chris's team, whom, even without any significant upgrades yet, managed to soundly defeat them.
重ね合ったこの手は絶対に離さないで。そういうことは家でやれ。
Is that becoming a catchphrase for Chris? Because with this series, I would totally approve. With that, we closed out things with Tiki setting up for some sort of ritual, which would require a sacrifice. The first half of AXZ really does start to take the series in some even better directions. I mean, not only did they bring back some of their previous strengths, like the over-the-top action, and mostly strong character moments, but they now have added in the spice of a little bit of continuity. Now, to be fair, continuity has always kind of been present in this series ever since G, especially when it came to the antagonists and their connections with one another, but never quite to this degree. It almost makes it feel like this series has always been building towards this, which might or might not have been the case, but regardless, it went a long way in making the Illuminati much more interesting villains in spite of their cliched goals. And with Katsumi Ono now being able to give the show his full attention, they were actually able to up the insane action of the series, which is saying something. Yeah, not all of it fit in perfectly, as some scenes did kind of feel thrown in, but the rule of cool kind of negates those sorts of nitpicks. And it's not as though they really detracted from a ton of good character moments, like Maria's team discovering the true meaning of that word that shall not be repeated. Yes, it was a ridiculously cheesy arc, but the character's strong motivations and determination made it work for the most part. And do I honestly have to point out how Chris is the most quotable character in this whole series? In general, this was a great start to a very fun season. We'll wrap up this series review with part 2 in a few weeks or so, and then we can start saying goodbye to 2020. Won't that be lovely? Come 2021, I've got a lot planned in the pipeline, and who knows, maybe I'll start experimenting with some new subjects. We'll see. Take a minute to make sure you're still subscribed, because apparently YouTube is doing one of their annual purges. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I think I have to do a little purge of my own.